Welcome, friends, to another episode of the Sports Card Dad. Today we are going to talk about some of the most overpriced cards at sports card shows, and some of these might actually surprise you. Stick around. What's going on, sports card hobby family? Back again. It's another day, another sports card video. We've got a fun topic today. Overpriced sports cards at sports card shows. This, of course, is going to be one of those where audience participation, you let me know what you think in the comments section, because people are going to have different opinions on this, and I think that's what makes the topic fun. Before I dive in, though, huge thanks to today's video sponsor, COMC.com. Speaking of buying and selling cards, easy, just moving in and out of cards on COMC, 35 plus million, baseball, football, basketball, all sorts of different goodness. They've got a football card submission special going on right now, so make sure to check out my links below to take you to COMC.com to get started. All right, this video was inspired by not a sports card channel, but one of my favorite comic book collecting channels, Sticky Goose Comics. You know, for me, guys, I'm trying my best to offer not just information, but some sort of entertainment value. That's why I've got Alf here. Alf, you have something to say? Always quiet. Trying to add some sort of flavor to a video, and Sticky Goose does this really well on the comic book side, always trying to come up with different topic ideas that are a little bit fun, a little bit outside of the box, not the run-of-the-mill vanilla stuff that we might see on the YouTubes. So his recent video, Most Overpriced Comics at Comic Book Cons, does kind of the same sort of thing where he's talking about, different things that are hot, cold, whatever, and how dealers operate at a comic book convention selling comic books. Well, today we're going to talk about how this kind of parlays over into sports cards, and we'll start off with the most obvious topic of overpriced cards at a sports card show, and it is the hype cards. It is the prospect of the month, the flavor du jour. For baseball, it might be Skeens. I'm looking for Skeens. This is what I would call players that are kind of in the 0 to 18 months, kind of the euphoria time, the prospecting, we got to get in on this particular player, that sort of stuff. Right now for the WNBA, it's probably Caitlin Clark or even Angel Reese. Maybe Caitlin Clark is a little bit beyond the prospect part. She's still obviously a rookie, but a proven one. So as you look at kind of the different types of prospects coming up, name your quarterback in the NFL. Is it Jared Goff? Is it Justin Herbert? A lot of the dealers, and I'm talking specifically, we'll just talk about the National because that's where I was last. And man, they're not selling their Justin Herbert RPAs or rookie cards at comp. What I saw, it was usually pretty steadily up above kind of baking in him kind of rebounding this season. Jordan Love is another one of these guys where people are all crazy about Jordan Love. Don't forget, like with Jordan Love and with like a CJ Stroud, another hot guy, there's such thing as a sophomore slump. There's a lot of guys had amazing rookie seasons. RG3, who was just fired from ESPN. Robert Griffin III is a perfect example of this, but there's so many of them where amazing rookie campaign and then they either get injured in the second year or what happens? NFL defenses are really good at adapting. They're really good. That's why you only really see a handful of quarterbacks in the league, like a Patrick Mahomes, that can steadily have just amazing seasons because defenses are good at game planning against what you like to do best in the NFL. And once they've got tape on you, it gets more and more difficult. So we'll see. With a lot of these young quarterbacks, they've shown some bright spots, but can they maintain excellence over time? That is so hard to do as an NFL quarterback. On the basketball side, we've got Wembanyama. He had a really promising rookie of the year, fantastic player, all in all, but his card prices reflect that. So you've got kind of the hype cards that you're always going to see at these particular shows. Next, we'll lean into more of kind of the ultra rare type stuff or things that, look, they maybe only printed 100 or a couple hundred. And I'm not talking about the parallel that's out of 99, but there's also a parallel out of 149 and 199, 299 and 29. I'm talking about where this is a thing where they made a couple hundred copies and that's it. I'm just going to use a non-sports card as an example because it was a recent purchase that I had, but this is kind of one of those where it's limited to a couple hundred copies. Mine has the 2008 inscription, the Robert Downey Jr. 2008 Rittenhouse, the Iron Man on-card autograph. There was one copy of this that we saw at the entire National, and it was $8,000 OBO. And the recent comp on it was like $5,500. The one the guy was selling did not have the inscription. So, we were looking at it, Neo and I were looking at it. He was going to make a play on it. I think he was up to maybe like $6,000, $7,000 on it, even though that's above comp. Again, it's just about finding, a copy and getting it at a decent price point. And really the $5,500 price point, that's not like, oh, you can get it at that price every day. Somebody was fortunate and got it at the $5,000, $5,500 mark, but they just don't sell. They sit in collections. On the sports card side, you have similar things like this too, where just have a rare card that just gets packed away into a collection. They're not considered flip cards. People aren't really buying these and flipping them and then buying it again and flipping it and flipping it. That's not what these cards are. They're more rare and they're more collector cards. They're kind of like grail card for a collector, and it's just not going to be flipped around. Those cards also usually have massive price tags on them because the dealer knows what they have. The other one of these, I'll just use eBay as kind of the dealer in this particular scenario, but the only other copy on eBay that has a 2008 inscription here is $49,000 OBO. I was lucky to snag this one on auction, Hakes Auctions. It was $5,500 plus the buying premium. It was $6,500 out the door. Did I get an amazing deal on it compared to the last comp of that particular card without the inscription? No, but at the same time, the other option is, I guess I try to haggle with the guy that's got it at $50K OBO. And at the National, you'll see the same thing. Cards where it's like, you just don't see them. They're asking a huge price. It's like the, in housing, what was that, like Make Me Move price on Zillow or something, or one of these sites, it was like, here's my Make Me Move price. And it's above, it's kind of a crazy number. But, people, if they have something that people want, they can ask whatever they want. They might not sell it, but they can just, one-of-ones in cards. You see this all the time. It's a one-of-one. It's a one-of-one. All right. Next, we'll move on to vintage cards. Now, for this category, there are a lot of vintage cards that trade hands. There are vintage cards that, of course, price properly and sell. Especially, again, we'll use the National just because that is I've never seen more vintage cards. You probably won't see more vintage cards anywhere else on the planet than the National. There's a lot of vintage dealers there. But there's also a lot of vintage dealers that are just kind of like, if it sells, it sells. I'm going to price it 10, 20, 30, 40% above kind of what it typically sells for because that's my price. Maybe they think that it's a very rare card. Typically most vintage cards are not, if we're just talking about the run-of-the-mill kind of 50s and 60s stuff. But I also do think too, I wonder this. Actually, I know a few guys that are like this where they're in their 60s, they're vintage card dealers. They do this for a living, in quotation marks, but they already had a career. So this is kind of like second career, job to get out of the house. Yes, they'd love to make a few bucks on some stuff, and they do make money, but they're not, like, their retirement is not counting on these card sales. They already have that in place. And that's where I think you get people that are a little bit more stingy because they literally just don't need the money. They're out here kind of having more fun. It's a second job career, something that they kind of retired into. I think it would be fun. I think it makes a lot of sense. You kind of round out your career and then you move into the hobby and you're doing some sort of a hobby business and you're in your 50s, 60s. It makes total sense to me. Again, because these guys, gals are not eating, they don't need this to eat. They don't need this to live off of necessarily. Why are they going to bend over backwards to make some sort of a great deal? But again, I think that's just a reality that we have to accept. I mean, everyone's got their own individual circumstances. Some of these vintage dealers are probably they're probably sitting on a couple $1,000,000 and this is fun for them. So it is a business, but it's not, we're living and dying by this business. All right. So that's some of the vintage stuff. The stuff, the bread and butter that's actually affordable, things where I think you can actually find deals at card shows, including the National, are looking for the great players that are not in the limelight. They're just not hot right now. They're not getting hobby love. For me, this is Drew Brees. Drew Brees is an all-time quarterback. He'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer. No denying it. I mean, he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but he's not Justin Herbert. He's not the flavor of the day. He's not Caleb Williams or, some of these QB, Bo Nix. Everyone's excited about the guys that are coming up. Drew Brees is an example. Tim Duncan in the basketball side. Allen Iverson, Dan Marino, Mike Piazza, George Brett on the baseball side. Those are two guys, I think it's funny. Mike Piazza and George Brett were incredible players. Just perennial all-stars. And when it comes to their cards, I mean, George Brett, of course, has got the great rookie card. 75 tops? I believe it's 75 tops. or 75 or 76 tops, great design. And, but his cards, I mean, if you want a high grade George Brett rookie card, it'll set you back a little bit. But outside of that, I mean, most of his cards are pretty attainable. Tony Gwynn would be another one of these guys. Tony Gwynn is a top, again, I'm not the baseball guy, but I would say he's a top 5 hitter of all time. And I know you'll throw out Ted Williams and Babe Ruth. Go and look at Tony Gwynn's stats and who he was up against. And the pitchers that absolutely hated to pitch against Tony Gwynn. The stories I always hear the most are Greg Maddux. Greg Maddux always lit everybody up. He was the best control pitcher of the 90s. He wasn't throwing Paul Skeens 110 mile an hour fastballs. He didn't need to. He just had control over his pitches. And he just looked like the average, Joe neighbor. He could be your neighbor, literally. He wasn't a physical presence. He just threw with such accuracy and control that he just struck everybody out. He was always on top of it. But Tony Gwynn hit off of Greg Maddux like he was just cutting through butter, man. And so Tony Gwynn, if you're going for a high grade Tony Gwynn rookie card, sure, it'll set you back. But for the most part, you can get nice Tony Gwynn cards and they're reasonable prices. If you're collecting some of these all-time greats that aren't necessarily the all-time GOATs, the Jordans and the Babe Ruths, but, they're just kind of like right there in the middle, but were always great players. Those are the cards that I see at the National or at sports card shows in general that are actually affordable in a lot of cases. You can wheel and deal with dealers and they're happy to sell because it's typically a collector. If you're coming in and you're kind of paying strong on a George Brett card, you probably love George Brett. You're a big Royals fan or whatever. So that's what I've got today, my friends. Let me know your thoughts. What's your experience? What are the most overpriced cards at a sports card show? And then where do you find deals? And I'm not talking about just like dollar box stuff. I'm talking about players in general. Which players do you have not a hard time finding deals on that you collect? All right, my friends, stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.